left, because everything else on the plastic board away. So I'll walk you through slightly with some of that. But you're supposed to know the difference between an artery and a vein histologically, which means a slide. So you want to go to JDOT, the favorite place to go. And you want to get good at identifying, is it an artery or is it a vein? So we're going to do this one. Oh, no, slide over. All right, so if this was a slide you would see next week on your quiz. The first question is, there's an artery and a vein on here. Which one is which?
Artery.
This one is which one? Sorry, how did you know?
Because the artery has to push the stuff.
Very good. So if you remember lecture, arteries are thicker walled because they have pressure, right? So the pressure, thicker wall like a fire hose versus garden hose. They're usually more rounded, but that's not always the rule, right? So the main thing you want to look for is the thickness. Veins are usually thinner. There's less pressure. They tend to be more kind of a blobby shape, not a round shape, not always. So you want to just, your first question is, an artery or vein? So the artery is on the left, veins on the right. So look for layers, the size of the layers, basically. And let's try. I won't show you which one it is. Oh, I got to do that one. This is a close-up. So there's something on the right, something on the left. The one on the right.
Artery.
Ah! How'd you know? Thicker than that. Vein over here, artery over there, right? So that's the clue you're looking for, is thickness of that layer. That's the big question. So once you know it's an artery or a vein, then you have to go back and name the layers within those layers, basically. So if you look at your magic sheet, there's tunicas, just like the eyeball had tunics. So you have tunica. So the easiest way to do it is start where the blood is on the inside, which is also called the lumen, because it's white. And work your way this way and look for color changes. For example, can everyone see there's a little red line out here? Okay. That would be the innermost tunic, or the tunica interna, or tunica intima. Either way is fine. I learned intima, so that tends to be what I use. But intimate or close. All right, that's the one closest to the blood, or internal.
Only in artery.
Actually, these ones have it too. It's just it's right here. That's the intima there. So what do you call the layer from here to here?
Media.
Tunica media, meaning middle. So middle layer. Then what would you call from about here to about there? Externa, or also called the adventitia. So you have three layers. You have an interna, a media, and an externa. Literally inside, middle, and outside. And that's true for the vein. There's just fewer of it. So interna, smaller media, and there's an externa. So you go from the inside out, intima, media, and externa. If you know the layers, then you're supposed to memorize the tissues you find there. So inside your interna, in here, what tissue would be on a surface of a blood vessel? Epithelium, but because it's in your blood vessels, we call it endothelium. It's the same rule, it's just different place. Then you remember you had a basal lamina, which glued it on, which you really can't discern there, right? So that's my interna. What's my media made out of?
Smooth muscle.
Smooth muscle. How do we know it has to be smooth muscle? Because it's involuntary, right? So smooth muscle, visceral muscle, and there's some elastic fibers. What is my externa made out of?
Elastic.
Out here, what are all those things? Areolar connective tissue, some fibrous connective tissue. So you're supposed to know on a slide, artery versus vein, tunica, and then within the tunica, the layers within it. So you memorize the bottom of 28. That's what you're going to do. So it's pretty simple histology as long as you catch on to which one is which. So I'm going to randomly put one up here, because I can. It gets harder when there's only one. So I'm going to give you just one. I hear voices for arteries. That is true. It's an artery. And how'd you know? Yeah, again, that media, which is the middle, is really, really thick. It's usually more round, not always, but it's fire hose is the analogy you want to use. Nice and round. So I'm going out there a little more. All right, so let's try. No, let's not try that one. Name it. Claim it. Vein. How'd you know? Thinner wall, not as round, though it can be. It's more of a oblong kind of shape.
What's the stuff that's kind of hanging out?
This would be the blood cells here. So these are blood cells. I'm not. Who knows, right? These are blood cells that are clotted up over here. I don't know what, some stain, goop, that's a good science word.
So is this an unhealthy vein?
That's okay. I don't know. So let's try this one.
Yeah.
You have a lot of things on the slide. Makes it a little bit harder.
Artery.
Where's the artery?
On the right. Left. Right by your
This one? Yes. We say, well, it's not perfectly round. Well, it's not always perfectly round. But the trick is it's rounder than this thing, and it's thicker. There's that media. This thing over here would be a vein. It's less round, not as thick. There's some other, these are nerves, by the way, up here. Okay. But you get the idea. So your first goal, artery versus vein. And once you know that, they have the same layers, just different thicknesses. It's a pretty simple slide. That's the only slide for next week, is that. You can just do that over and over and over.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Let me see if I have one more to throw at you. This one is the other vessel you have to know just to understand it. What is this little teeny tiny blood vessel that you actually can't see anything with? Where exchange happens. That's a capillary. So capillary you would not see under most of the slides. But capillary is just one cell thick little capillary. So there's your capillary. So all they have is an endothelium. They're one layer. There's nothing else in there. There's no muscle. Make sense? All right. So if you keep that in mind, there is a model to help you with the slides. That is the intertwined trees of love over here. Let me bring it on up to the front, since you're all pointing cameras at me anyway. At some point in your college career, you want to take a picture of this. Especially with it open. So, this represents two different kinds of blood vessels. So we have the big guy in the middle, and we have these two. The big one in the middle is a what? Artery. How did you know? Thicker. And what's really nice, if you turn it this way, you can tell right there there's a round and not round, thick and thin, right? That's the trick you want. So, but you can see the tunicas, you can see the tissues. There's another little trick. What are these?
Valves.
Valves. Who has valves? Veins have valves because of low pressure. So this model matches the slide you saw in JDoc. So you do want to at least take a look at this and label the tunicas as well. You okay in the intertwined trees of love? All right, so give that a look. This is just pure plug and chug. There's nothing I can tell you up here that's magical. That would not be paired and not match. So you probably want to pay more attention to the exceptions and not just remember everyone else is two even. Right? This is kind of a general rule of thumb. If the artery and vein are in the same place on the model, they're usually the same name because they lie next to each other. So I'll show you in a weird sort of way. Let's use this guy. Okay. So on this model, just vaguely, this is not always a rule, but it matches up. If you look in the leg here, you'll see there's a red and a blue thing right next to each other. That means they're going to have the same name in general. So what would you call something in your thigh?
Femoral.
Femoral, right? So the red one would be your femoral artery. Your blue one would be the femoral vein. So in general, if you get stuck on a quiz, if they're right next to each other, they're going to pretty much be the same name most of the time. Here's something, though, that only has a blue. There's no red. That means it's going to be a different name than the arteries because it's not next to or congruent with. So if you see something that's off by itself, usually it's going to be the ones that doesn't have a pair or partner. Make sense? The other quick rule on a quiz is just go back to 231. What do you call something in your thigh? Femur, femoral. What do you call something in your armpit? Axillary. So if you're stuck, just name the body part from 231. It's probably right. Because almost all these words, other than a few of them, are the names you learn in 231. You know? Your iliac, near your hip, right? Radial would be on my thumb side. So I mean, you just basically guess on some of these.
So what is that one that's just singular?
It's the great saphenous vein. So it's a vein. It does not have a partner artery, and it's a saphenous. But there are two.
Where does the saphenous?
Saphenous comes up your leg, and it's an additional vein to drain your leg. So the saphenous. So what you want to do on this one is, unfortunately, every board boy is different in how they're laid out. The mini-men are all different. I wish I had some magic. But basically, you want to plug and chug as many of these as you can just by pointing and naming. Right? So a couple general things to pay attention to. pay attention to the neck because they're named differently. Carotids versus jugulars. So they have the same place but different names. Right? That's one of those places people catch you. The other thing to pay attention to is common is different than interelectric. Anyone know what common means in blood vessels? Shared or together. So you common and then you split. So a common carotid is in your neck. As it splits at your head, it becomes an internal and an external. So like a fork in the road. So you want to be careful of those that split because there's a different name before and after the split. So you got to be careful it's common or something else. You have a common iliac, you have an internal external iliac because it splits. So be careful of that word in front, if it's common or not. Otherwise, you're just basically going to sit here and cry for the next hour long to memorize all these blood vessels.
What are you doing? Leaving me out?
These all go to you guys.
Honestly, you should just go over all of them.
I do, don't I?
Oh my gosh, it's like
Actually, what we were doing.
Yeah, I'm just pushing you out of the way. It's okay.
that's okay. You can see.
Is this what a rock star feels like? Without the drugs and the sex and the rock and roll? Without the liver damage? Right. All right, so let's go through this one since I was answering questions. All right, so what I would do on this model is I would look at it this way.
Let me get out of your way.
And I would say, okay, class, what is this one? And you'd say that's a artery because it's rounder, it's thicker. This one's a vein, not as round, not as thick. So if I were looking at this in profile, I'd see, okay, there's a layer to this white line here. There's the red layer and then this pinky layer. So I have my tunica intima or interna, would be the innermost. The media would be the meat. And then the externa or adventitia would be the outermost. I have my 3 layers. So then if I open that up, unembrace. There you go. I see the same game. So I see my artery here, my veins. Let's do the artery. So I'm touching the yellow. That's going to be the endothelium of the tunica intima. That's the innermost of the innermost. And then it's going to have a basal lamina. It's connective tissue right there, which is the color you see here. The red is going to be the smooth muscle of the tunica media, because that's the meat of the vessel, which you can see here. And then out here is going to be the tunica externa. That would be the areolar and fibrous tissue of the the tunica externa, which is out here. And then this would be the same thing for the vein, but thinner. So my intima is about the same, but my media is a lot thinner. And there's my adventitia, or externa. And then I have my valves. That's basically all you got to know on that one, pretty much. I think, is there something else on here I'm missing?
Oh. Can you see?
Got those? Oh. There's one other thing you're supposed to read about, which is elastic versus muscular. So a muscular artery has more muscle, obviously. An elastic artery has less muscle, but more of these fibers that make it stretch. So depending on which artery you're in, it can be more muscular or less muscular, but the trick is they're still better than the vein. Right?
So which arteries are elastic?
The ones that have the highest pressure.
Okay, so they're going to be right close to the heart.
Yeah, pretty
like
much.
the
So your
right
aorta
coronary?
should be very stretchy. And
Like
then,
the right coronary artery, left coronary artery?
no, like the aorta. Those are the,
Like the aorta.
right, so they can act as a reserve in general. But they have a mixture. Every artery is going to be a mixture of muscle and elastin in general. So let's see.
What
That's all
about
that.
femoral? Would that be muscular?
I'll have to look. That doesn't ring a
It's a
bell.
fairly big artery.
It might be. I'll have to look that up. That's not something I keep in my head which one is where. Of course, I could be
Yeah,
totally wrong,
because
too.
of that.
Oh yeah.
All right, so again, if it were me, I would study as though I'm going from the heart and going up or down in my head. So I'm going to go up from my heart. I'm going to take this tube here, which is also over here, but you can't see it. That's going to go up my neck, which would be the what?
Carotid.
Common carotid artery. And this model shows very well the split. So right here, this blood vessel keeps going on the outside of my head, so that would be which carotid? It's on the outside, external. You notice this one branches and goes inside my skull and pops out in my head, in my brain, so that's going to be the internal carotid. So common to internal to external. Then these ones split some more. So here it pops up on my head, kind of like that. So what do you call that side of my head? Superficial temporal. Because it's on the surface of my temples. It also goes, what about this side, kind of under my, you don't need it, right? Under my jaw, maxillary, and then climbs up my face, so facial. So you're basically doing just naming the body part. So what else? The occipital is just shown kind of like this. They don't show it connecting, but that's my occipital because it's in the back of my head. Then you have to get down again. So if you get down, the only thing you have to remember is it's jugulars, not carotid. So, and these models don't show them very well. You notice there's not a lot of blue, but it does show one here. This would be my jugular vein coming down into my neck. So it doesn't show the other veins up in here, but they would be named the same, pretty much. So then I want to get to my arm. Let's do this. You don't need lungs. So, if we start here, ascending aorta, arch. You want to go to the right arm or left arm? Pick one.
Right.
I heard left first.
Right,
So,
first too.
that means I'm going to go up to my subclavian, which is, you can't see, but it curves under my clavicle. I'm going to turn here, my axillary, and I'm going to go down my arm. Let's see it. As my... I'm going to go down as my brachial. And once I get to my elbow, I'm not going to change the names now, because some of it's going to go to my pinky, ulnar, some are going to go to my thumb, radial. So just using the bones you learned before. Then coming back, there are none on this model to show you. So they're just the arteries.
Is it the yellow or the red?
Yellows are the nerves.
Oh, okay.
So that's what we learned. Now if I went to the right arm, I'd be one difference. I have my ascending aorta to my arch. But then I have to get to the right side of the body. So I have to do the brachiocephalic, it's a jumper, to my common carotid and also my subclavian. So then I'd go ascending arch, brachiocephalic, subclavian, and then do the same route. So if I went to this side, I have no brachiocephalic. If I go to this side, I have a brachiocephalic. So there's a difference there between the right and the left side. If I want to go down, let's do that. Where do you? Yeah, of course, good. All right, so this represents where the hanger is your celiac trunk. So this big pipe right here is representing the celiac trunk, which is all this plumbing here. Celiac trunk is going to go to my spleen, to my liver, to my stomach, and vice versa. So that would be all those hepatic, splenic, and mesenteric arteries. But if I keep going, I'm in my abdominal aorta. Now I'm going to go here, which is my common iliacs, to my internal, external iliacs. Then once I branch out, now I'm in my femoral artery. On this model, yeah, they do show it. There's my popliteal, and then it pretty much peters out by the time I get down there with the tibial and fibular. And then there's no veins on this model to show coming back. Makes sense? He does have the thoracics, which are these ones back here, along your ribs. So this one does show the thoracic and the rib cage. It's the only one that shows behind that. So this is one thing the board boys don't have, is that one. The vertebrals.